Hi, I'm Sean Coates, and welcome to this tutorial where firstly we will be inside of Mari and then we'll move things along into Katana. So inside of Mari's node graph, our objective is to create a kind of stylized, kind of Disney-esque type character that we're all so familiar with. We're going to be using very simple nodes and very simple techniques to create some masks for things like blushing. We're going to add some freckles and then some lips, as you can see in the node graph before you. And then once we're happy with our textures in Mari, we're going to move everything to Katana and do a little bit of look development using Arnold as our renderer. So I hope you enjoy this, and let's begin. So the first thing I'm going to do is delete all of the nodes that are currently in my node graph because we're going to start from scratch. So I'm going to tab on my keyboard and create an Arnold standard surface shader network. I'm using Arnold because we are going to be using Arnold later on inside of Katana. And another cool thing that the Arnold standard surface does inside of Mari is it allows you to actually preview the subsurface in the viewport, which I find to be quite helpful. So I'm going to just quickly do a little bit of a look development inside of Mari and change the roughness to 0.5 inside of the specular. And I'm going to change the index of refraction to 1.3. This is more similar to skin, before it was far too shiny. We're then going to hit tab on the keyboard again and create a color node. This is going to be the base color for our character's skin and the pigmentation. So I'm just going to go into the node properties again, double click on the color bar and select the skin color that I want. So here I'm just going to select a peachy, quite warm and bright color. I'm then going to plug the output of the color into the diffuse color of the Arnold standard surface. I'm then going to select the shader and hit 1, and that will then view it in the viewport, and you can see the color on the bust. I'm then going to hit tab on the keyboard again and create a cloud node. Inside of the node properties, I'm going to name this node Blush because that's exactly what this node is going to be doing. So inside of color A in the node properties, I'm going to pick a fairly desaturated bright red, like that of kind of blushing cheeks or blushing ears. And then for color B, I'm going to pick a more saturated and darker color. It's good to pick two colors because it allows a bit of breakup and it makes for a more interesting texture. It's a subtle effect, but it's worth doing. We're then going to hit M inside of the node graph, and that creates a merge node. We're going to plug the color into the base and the blush into the over. Now inside of the viewport we can see just the cloud node, and I think it's a little bit rough, so we're going to turn the roughness down to 0.1. This is so there's a softer gradation between the two colours that we have selected. I'm then going to select all of the nodes we just made and create a backdrop node. This backdrop node is going to be titled Pigment. And then inside of the background colour of the node, inside of the node properties, I'm going to change it to a bright pink. These colours are quite useful actually, because when you zoom out from a really complicated network, you can, if you remember what colour you've picked, you can colour code things, and it's just, you know, one way of staying organised, and it makes the network less boring to look at. We're then going to create a 2-point gradient node. This is going to act as a mask for our blush, because as you can see inside of the viewport now, we can only see the blush and we can't see any of that skin colour that we selected earlier. We're then going to head over to the node properties and change the mode from linear to radial. This will create a radial gradient rather than a linear one. We're then going to call this forehead because this is what this 2-point gradient is going to target. Now it's important we title this before we make our locators, because the name of the locators will adopt the name of this node. So if we hit the plus on locator A, it creates forehead 3, and the plus creates forehead 4 in locator B. And inside of the objects tab you can see they've appeared. So this is a useful thing to do because we're going to be using multiple 2-point gradient nodes, and if they're automatically named inside of the objects tab, then we can easily locate them and make adjustments later if needs be. So we're then going to hit the P in the node properties next to locator A, and this will allow us to transform our point. So I'm going to hit 2 inside of the viewport, and it's going to give me this side view of my model. This is really useful when transforming my points because my point is already set in the center of the model, so all I have to do is move it up and to one side of the forehead, and then we're going to hit P and do the same for locator B, but we're going to move it to the other side of the forehead. If you hit 5 you can get that front view back, and 4 and 3 also do like top and bottom views. So it's really useful to bear that in mind when transforming your points. This will take a little bit of adjustment, and for each time you do it, you can always go back and change it. And this is kind of the beauty of using 2-point gradient nodes rather than hand painting it in, because you can always go back and adjust, and you don't have to bother painting things in and painting things out. It's just as simple as moving 2 points until you're happy with it. And if you're not happy with it, you can go back and change it. It's non-destructive, and it's really, really useful. You know, and it's going to naturally give us this soft fall off that we want. For like blushing skin, we want things to feel soft and squishy and kind of stylized, like you would expect to see in a character of this type. So now that I'm satisfied with the location of the forehead mask, I'm now going to move on and repeat the same process, but this time we're going to do it for the nose. So inside of the node properties, we're going to title this node Nose. So we're then going to create our 2 points by hitting the plus next to locator A and locator B. And then we're going to hit P, and this is going to allow us to move locator A. Now here I've still got my blending mode on linear, so we're not seeing the radial gradient that we need just to target one area of the face. So we're going to go into the mode and we're going to change that to radial, and then we will begin to see that effect happening once we move locator B up towards it. So again, either side of the nose, and it's the same thing, bit of adjustment until you're happy with the location of it. I just want it to be hitting just the nose itself. So if the orthographic views aren't helping you and you want to kind of tumble the model, just inside of the viewport, hold Alt and drag your mouse and you can find an angle that works, so you can see things clearly. So I think I'm happy with that. So inside of our objects tab, we're going to click back on our character base geometry, and this is going to take us back to that node graph, because when you create a 2-point gradient node, the node graph moves away from it because it treats the point like an object in space. So I'm going to hit M on the keyboard to create a merge node, and I'm going to plug the forehead into the base, and I'm going to plug the nose into the over. I'm then going to go into the node properties of the merge and change the mode to screen. So now you can see inside of our viewport, if we view that merge, both gradients sitting in the same space. We're then going to take the output of this merge and plug it into the mask of our color and blush merge. So now we're going to zoom into the face in the viewport by Alt, right click and dragging, and it will zoom us in. And then inspecting the blushing areas in the forehead and the nose, and I'm thinking I could now go back and probably adjust the color a little bit to just heighten the effect and make it a little bit redder and a little bit more vivid. So I'm going to take the color A and I'm going to just pick a more saturated hue just to kind of boost that effect even more, so we can get it coming through a little bit more than it is. Now you may feel that this might be a little bit of a pointless exercise because of how subtle the effect is, but these kind of textures on these type of characters aren't necessarily the most complicated textures in the world. So it's the very subtle and simple details that make all the difference. So we're going to create another 2-point gradient node by hitting tab in the node graph, and we're going to repeat this process, but this time we're going to do it for the right ear, the left ear, and then both cheeks. We're going to use the same merge with the screen blending mode to merge each one downstream to the first merge that we've made. So I'm not going to make you watch me do this over and over and over again. Instead, I trust you and your instincts to follow along, and you know, you're on your own for a bit, and I'll see you at the other end when I've made all of the masks for, again, both cheeks and both ears. I'll fast forward through it so you can see what I'm doing. So now we're coming to the end of positioning these gradient nodes, and I hope you've managed to get some kind of balance correct. I was having a little bit of trouble getting the two cheeks to line up exactly, but I was quite happy with the shape of them. So I'm going to add a levels node between the left cheek and the merge, and I'm literally just going to grab the white values and pull them down a bit to match the other cheek. And I suppose you could do this for each feature. So if you wanted the nose to be a bit more exaggerated, you could just add a levels and pull the whites up. So I'm then going to create a backdrop node with all of these nodes selected, and I'm going to call it mask_blush. And then inside of the node properties, I'm going to select the color of the backdrop, and this time I'm going to select like a lighter blue. There's no reasoning for this, pick whatever color you like. So now if we select our Arnold shader network, we can hit 1 to view it, and in the viewport I can now see them all together. We've got a nice subtle effect on the nose, the ears and the forehead, but I feel like the cheeks could probably be a little bit more balanced, so I'm just gonna go back over to my mask blush section, and I'm gonna make an adjustment to the levels on the left cheek. I'm just gonna bring the whites down to 0.542, and then I'm going to create another levels node for the right cheek. So I'm just going to bring the whites down here to about 0.9, and then I'm going to make one more final adjustment where I'm just going to heighten the effect on the nose, because I think it could be a little bit stronger, but again, this is all personal preference. I'm just showing you how customizable this can be. You could also, you know, obviously change the positioning of the blush and what it's affecting, so you've got so much control here. This is just one way to quickly kind of chop and change things. So with this final levels node, I'm just going to lower the mids a bit, so that red's coming through a little bit more. And I think I'm pleased with the result of that, and we can now move on. So the last thing I'm going to do to the actual diffuse of the skin itself is add a tiny little bit of breakup, just so it's not one solid block color. So to do this, I'm just going to multiply a cloud node, a very soft cloud node, over the top of everything. So I'm going to hit tab on the keyboard and create a cloud node, and then I'm going to create a merge node, and I'm going to plug the last merge node in our stream into the base and the cloud's output into the over. So inside of the merge properties, I'm going to change the mode to multiply, and I'm going to turn the mix down to 0.1. And then inside of the cloud properties, I'm going to turn the roughness down to 0 or 0.25, so we have a softer kind of breakup. Again, this is a really subtle effect and you can barely see it, but I think any kind of breakup is really good for organic textures and will add to the believability, and you can always turn this up or down depending on the style you're going for. So now we're ready to move on, and we are going to now procedurally create some freckles to go over the bridge of the nose and onto the start of the cheeks, and maybe we can scatter one or two in a random place just to make it seem more believable. So we're going to hit tab on the keyboard, and we're going to create a cloud node. So we're going to double click on the cloud node that we've just made, and inside of the node properties we are going to change the size to 0.18, and we're going to turn the roughness down to 0. We're then going to hit tab on the keyboard and create a levels node. We're going to plug the output of the cloud node into the input of the levels node, and then we're going to view the levels node by hitting 1 or 2. So here we're going to pull the whites the whole way down, and we're just going to lift the blacks up a tiny little bit, so we're going to call it at 0.07. So now if we zoom in, we can see these white shapes appearing that look very much like little freckles and moles on a face. But I'm going to multiply these over the top of our texture that we already have. So I need the moles to be darker and I need the rest of it to be white. So I'm going to hit tab on the keyboard again and create an invert node and plug the output of the levels into the input of the invert. And now obviously it's inverted the color. So with the merge above, the last one in the stream selected, I'm going to hit M, and that's going to create a merge node. I'm going to plug the invert into the over, and then I'm going to double click on the merge node that we've just created, and I'm going to change the blend mode to multiply. So now if I hit 1 or 2 with the merge node that we have created selected, I will be able to view my freckles in the viewport. And obviously we can see that we haven't controlled it at all. They're far too fierce and they're absolutely everywhere. So what we are going to have to do is probably turn the blend mode down a bit because they are a little bit too thick and kind of they stand out too much. So I'm going to turn the amount down in the mix to 0.7. And then what we're going to do is we're going to hit tab on the keyboard and create a paint node. And where it says color inside of the add paint node, we're just going to get that slider there from transparent and send it all the way to black. So now we should have a solid black color inside of that paint node. So if you connect it to the mask, all the freckles disappear. So now we're going to select the brush tool in the top left hand corner on your shelf up there. And with a white color selected, we're just going to hand paint some of these freckles back in. And you know, this is totally up to you where you want to paint these in, where you want to place them. You can put, you know, random ones just on like a bit further away on the cheek or on the bridge of the nose, on the side of the head, on the neck, or even on the arms, or wherever you want to place them. It's totally up to you. This is your creative control. I'm only giving you some guidelines that you can roughly follow. Also, when you're working, it's a good idea not to just view the merge node and the raw color. You actually want to view the shader to actually pre-visualize how these are sitting inside of your shading network. So now I'm happy with how I've kind of placed all the freckles. I'm going to select all of those and I'm going to create a backdrop node. And this backdrop node is going to be titled Freckles. So I'm then going to select the background color and I'm going to select a dark brown because that's the color of a freckle and that's the color of the backdrop that I'm picking. So the last thing we're going to do really in this very quite simple network, I think, is paint some lips in, because right now she currently doesn't have any and it looks a little bit weird. So I'm going to move around this and make a little bit more room. Not that we're going to need much room, but we are also going to make some bake points when we export our textures. So I'm then going to hit tab inside of the node graph and create yet another cloud node. And this cloud node is basically going to dictate the coloring of our lips. So again, we're just going to select color A. Right now, we can adjust this a little bit later, but just any red will work, just so we can see what we're doing. And then in color B, just select a different red. Could be darker, could be lighter. Really depends on what kind of lips you're going to do, right? So these are quite similar shades at the minute, but we'll see how we go. And then going to select the latest merge and hit M and create another merge downstream to it, and then plug the output of this cloud into the over of the new merge. So right now, all we can see is the color of the cloud on our bust, which isn't ideal. It looks like it has no skin at all. It's a bit creepy, but not to worry. We're going to create a mask. We're going to hand paint this in because this is quite an intricate detail that probably takes a little bit of eyeing up, and it's also quite a customizable bit where, you know, you're just going to paint the lips that you want to make. So I'm just going to do a little bit more adjustment of the color. You don't really have to do this. I'm just fiddling around at this point. And then what we're going to do is we're going to hit tab on the keyboard and create a paint node. This already has the black coloring that we had before for the freckles. So this is going to flood this out and we're not going to see it anymore. And then with our paintbrush selected and the paint node selected, we're just going to literally spend a little bit of time here. And we're going to, firstly, I'm just going to crudely paint some lips in, just really crudely. Because we're going to refine it a little bit later by changing the size of our brush and also, you know, hitting X on the keyboard there. You see I hit X and then it switches from white to black because the palettes switch over when you hit X. So now I can actually take away the bits that are crudely done. And this is how I like to shape things and shape masks, because, you know, you're refining it and you can always put back and take away, put back and take away. So yet again, I'm just going to fast forward through this process because you don't need to watch me painstakingly paint the shape of some lips, because you're going to be painstakingly painting the shape of some lips yourself. So yeah, just, you know, be patient, take your time with it, and get it the way you want it. So now I'm happy with the shape of my lips. I'm going to go back into the color A and desaturate it a little bit, make it a little bit darker, and then I'm going to go into B and just darken that color down, because I thought they were a little bit too fierce and a little bit too saturated. Look, they stuck out a little bit for me, but again, this is all personal preference. You can pick blue lips if you like. But yeah, okay, I'm just going to settle around there. Okay, and then zoom out, and then yeah, I think that fits a little bit nicer. So finally, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a subsurface scattering color map. So what this entails is I'm just going to take the second from last merge, so the merge before the lips, and I'm going to plug that into the input of a grade node. So you just type tab and then type in grade. So I'm going to plug that merge into the input there, and then I'm going to hit 2 to view it, and I'm going to plug the grades output into the subsurface color of our shader. So I'm going to quickly go in the shader settings in the node properties, and I'm going to turn the subsurface on. So I'm just going to turn up the subsurface for now to a random number, 0.39 in this case, maybe a little bit more, 0.5, about halfway. Okay, so now with our grade node selected, we're just going to mess with some of these values in here. So the gamma we're going to turn down, and we're just going to get this orangey darker hue coming down. We're going to offset it, so we're going to darken it a bit there. And here you can kind of fiddle around with these various settings to get the kind of balance that you want. But what we're aiming for is we're aiming for like a fleshy, darker version of our skin. So we kind of get this kind of fleshy feel coming through, so it feels kind of like more translucent, like jelly, like flesh. So with it selected, I'm just going to play with some of these settings until I'm relatively happy with it. But again, if this map doesn't work, we can come back in and we can desaturate it, we can darken it again, we can saturate it. So once I'm in Katana, I'll know if I need to redo this or make any adjustments to it. But for now, we're just going to call it there for now, and I think that's pretty cool. So, and in the viewport, I think the effect is probably coming on a little bit too strong, which looks a little bit waxy perhaps. So I'm just going to go back into the settings of the Arnold standard surface, and I'm going to turn the subsurface effect down to 0.25. So I'm going to half it again, and I think that looks a little bit better. But again, we're going to be really finessing this and getting the subsurface scattering correct inside of Katana when we actually look dev this model. So if I turn the subsurface to 0, we can see it without it being affected, and then if we turn it back to 0.3, it's just got a little bit of colour in, you know, it's put a little bit of life into the model. So I've just noticed that I forgot to make a backdrop node for the lips that we made, so I'm going to select the cloud and the paint node that we made our lips with, create a backdrop node, call it lips, and I'm then going to select the background color, which I'm just going to select any red. So now I think our network is more or less done. We now have to export our textures and then take them into Katana. So at the end of each output, we're going to create a bake point. Bake points are a really useful tool inside of Mari's node graph when thinking about how to optimize a scene, especially if a scene is pretty heavy and it's taking a lot to compute it. They're more or less like checkpoints inside of your script that once you've baked them, you no longer have to compute everything downstream to it. So what we're going to do is inside of the bake points node properties, we're going to hit bake. And what's that going to do? It's going to save everything downstream to it into that node. And then we're going to do the same for the subsurface color channel. So we're just going to hit bake again. It's going to do the same thing. So then once they're both baked, we can then go to the Export tab inside of the Bake Points node properties and export our texture over 2 UDIMs, which is what this model has, with our chosen format. I'm going to format it as a TIFF, and I'm just going to save it in my chosen directory with my chosen namespace. So in this case, that's character skin and then $UDIM, which will assign 2 UDIMs because that's how many there are. And then I just hit export all patches and it will export my textures as a TIFF, which is really useful. And then we're just going to do exactly the same thing for the subsurface color. I don't need to show you that because we've already done it once. Just repeat the process. But you know, I hope you've really enjoyed this first half of this tutorial inside of Mari, and kind of the aim was to create a very simple texture but quite an effective one when creating these more stylized characters. And I hope I've managed to show you that you can get a really good result with not that many nodes and quite a simple network. So now let's take these textures that we've exported and move into Katana and finish this process and do some look development and lighting.